Welcome, everyone. Wonderful that we can all be together to share not only a great body of wisdom, but also to be contributing to that body of wisdom with our collaborative conversation about what we've inherited and what would like to contribute to the legacy of this particular body of wisdom. We are in Parshat Ekev, which is in the book of Deuteronomy. It's in chapter 7. It's going to begin with verse 12 of chapter 7. If you're muted and you'd like to unmute to join in the recitation of the blessing, giving thanks for this moment, feel free to do so. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kishanu mitzvotav v'tzivanu la'asot b'divrei Torah. Thank you, God, for the opportunity this moment to immerse ourselves in words, deeds, and relationships of Torah. We'll read together the English translation of our Torah portion, and then I'll share with you a focused study about it, and then we'll open it up for our collaborative conversation about it. And I will begin with the opening verses to our Torah portion, and then I'll invite others to have an opportunity to read as well. Book of Deuteronomy, chapter 7, beginning with verse 12. And if you listen to these rules and observe them carefully, Adonai your God will maintain faithfully for you the covenant that God made on oath with your ancestors. God will favor you and bless you and multiply you. God will bless the issue of your womb and the produce of your soil, your new grain and wine and oil, the calving of your herd and the lambing of your flock, and the land that God swore to your ancestors to assign to you. You shall be blessed above all other peoples. There shall be no sterile male or female among you or among your livestock. Adonai will ward off from you all sickness. God will not bring upon you any of the dreadful diseases of Egypt, about which you know, but will inflict them upon your enemies. You shall destroy all the peoples that Adonai your God delivers to you, showing them no pity. And you shall not worship their gods, for that would be a snare to you. Should you say to yourselves, these nations are more numerous than we, how can we dispossess them? You need have no fear of them. You have but to bear in mind what Adonai your God did to Pharaoh and all the Egyptians, the wondrous acts that you saw with your own eyes, the signs and portents, the mighty hand, and the outstretched arm by which Adonai your God liberated you. Thus will Adonai your God do to all the peoples you now fear. Adonai your God will also send a plague against them, until those who are left in hiding perish before you. Do not stand in dread of them, for Adonai your God is in your midst, a great and awesome God. And Richard, would you like to continue there with verse 22 and then read a little bit more of chapter 8 as well?
You bet. Thank you, Rabbi. The Lord your God will dislodge those people before you little by little, and you will not be able to put an end to them at once, else the wild beasts would multiply to your hurt. The Lord your God will deliver them up to you, throwing them into the utter panic until they are whipped out. He will deliver their kings into your hand, and you shall obliterate their name from under the heavens. No man shall stand up to you until you have wiped them out. You shall consign the images of their gods to fire. You shall not covet the silver and gold on them, and keep it for yourselves, lest you be ensnared thereby. For that is abhorrent to the Lord your God. You must not bring an aberrant thing into your house, or you will be proscribed like it. You must reject it as abominable and abhorrent, for it is proscribed. A lot of stuff in between the lines.
Okay. And the last few words there, you must reject it as abominable and abhorrent, for it is prescribed. Yes, thank you.
Do you want me to go on?
Yes, please.
You shall faithfully observe all the instructions that I enjoin upon you today, that you may thrive and increase and be able to occupy the land which the Lord promised on oath to your fathers. Remember the long way that the Lord your God has made you travel in the wilderness these past 40 years, that he might test you by hardships to learn what was in your hearts, whether you would keep his commandments or not. He subjected you to the hardship of hunger and then gave you manna to eat, which neither you nor your fathers had ever known, in order to teach you that man does not live on bread alone, but that man may live on anything that the Lord decrees. The clothes upon you did not wear out, nor did your feet swell those 40 years. Bear in mind that the Lord your God disciplines you just as a man disciplines his son. Therefore, keep the commandments of the Lord your God. Walk in his ways and revere him.
Thank you, Richard. And Steve, would you like to continue there at verse 7 of chapter 8? And you'll just need to unmute.
Sorry, I got one screen on top of another and then didn't have a full-size window. So the answer was yes. Thank you. This is verse 7 of chapter 8.
Yes.
For the Lord your God is bringing you into a good land, a land with streams and springs and fountains issuing from plain and hill, a land of wheat and barley, of vines, figs, and pomegranates, a land of olive trees and honey, a land where you may eat food without stint, where you will lack nothing, a land whose rocks are iron, and from whose hills you can mine copper. When you have eaten your fill, give thanks to the Lord your God for the good land which he has given you. Take care lest you forget the Lord your God and fail to keep his commandments, his rules, and his laws, which I enjoin upon you today. When you have eaten your fill and have built fine houses to live in, and your herds and flocks have multiplied, and your silver and gold have increased, and everything you own has prospered, beware lest your heart grow haughty, and you forget the Lord your God, who freed you from the land of Egypt, the house of bondage, who led you through the great and terrible wilderness with its serpents and scorpions, a parched land with no water in it, who brought forth water for you from the flinty rock, who fed you in the wilderness with manna, which your fathers had never known, in order to test you by hardships, only to benefit you in the end. And you say to yourselves, will my own power and the might of my own hand have won? My own power and the might of my own hand have won this wealth for me. Remember that it is the Lord your God who gives you the power to get wealth in fulfillment for the covenant he made on oath with your fathers, as is still the case. If you do forget the Lord your God and follow other gods to serve them or bow down to them, I warn you this day that you shall certainly perish. Like the nations that the Lord will cause to perish before you, so shall you perish, because you did not heed the Lord your God.
Thank you, Steve. And Margot, would you like to read at the very start of chapter 9? And you'll need to unmute to do that. Margot, if you'd like to share with us and read, you'll need to unmute.
Okay,
Yes.
I'm just reading along. No one can hear me. I'll start again. 9. We're in verse 9. Hear, O Israel, you are about to cross the Jordan and go in and dispossess nations greater and more populous than your great cities, with walls sky high and people great and tall, the Anakites, of whom you have knowledge, for you have the Anakites, of whom you have knowledge, for you have heard said, who can stand up? I'm sorry, my glasses are. You can you can stand up to the to the Chilians of Anak. Know then that this day that none other than the Lord your God is crossing at your head, a devouring. I'm sorry, my glasses. Let somebody else. My glasses.
Okay.
These are not my
The
regular.
Lord your God is crossing at your head a devouring fire. It is God
Okay.
who will wipe them out. God will subdue them before you, that you may quickly dispossess and destroy them as God promised you. And when Adonai your God has thrust them from your path, say not to yourselves, God has enabled us to possess this land because of our virtues. It is rather because of the wickedness of those nations that God is dispossessing them before you. It is not because of your virtues and your rectitude that you will be able to possess their country, but it is because of their wickedness that Adonai your God is dispossessing those nations before you, and in order to fulfill the oath that God made to your ancestors, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. And Linda, would you like to continue reading? We're at verse 6.
Sure. I just love when Margot reads, though. I'm sorry her glasses were giving her trouble because it's the best reading when Margot reads.
Thank you.
Mm.
Okay.
Mm.
I can take
Yeah.
the paragraph if you want before you start.
Sure, please do.
And then you can start on 8. I'll do 6.
All
No,
right.
this is not for any virtue of yours that the Lord your God is giving you this good land to possess, for you are a stiff-necked people. Remember, never forget how you provoked the Lord your God to anger, again, my problem, to anger in the wilderness. From the day that you left the land of Egypt until you reached this place, you have continued to defiant toward the Lord.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. Wonderful, both of you. So, Linda, if now you'd continue.
So at Horeb, you angered the Lord, and the Lord was incensed with you to destroy you. When I ascended the mountain to receive the stone tablets, the tablets of the covenant which the Lord made with you, I remained on the mountain 40 days and 40 nights, and I neither ate bread nor drank water. And the Lord gave me 2 stone tablets inscribed by the finger of God, and on them was inscribed, according to all the words that the Lord spoke with you on the mountain from in the midst of the fire on the day of the assembly. And it came to pass at the end of 40 days and 40 nights that the Lord gave me 2 stone tablets, the tablets of the covenant. And he said to me, arise, descend quickly from here, for your people whom you have brought out of Egypt have become corrupt. They've quickly deviated from the way in which I commanded them. They have made for themselves a molten image. And the Lord spoke to me further, saying, I've seen this people, and behold, it is a stiff-necked people. Leave me alone, and I'll destroy them, and obliterate their name from beneath the heavens. And I will make you into a nation mightier and more numerous than they. So I turned and came down from the mountain, and the mountain was burning with fire, and the 2 tablets of the covenant were on my 2 hands. And I saw, and behold, you had sinned against the Lord your God. You had made yourselves a molten calf. You have deviated quickly from the way in which the Lord has commanded you. So I grasped the 2 tablets, cast them out of my 2 hands, and shattered them before your eyes. And I fell down before the Lord as before, 40 days and 40 nights. I neither ate bread nor drank water because of all your sins that you had committed by doing evil in the eyes of the Lord to anger him. For I was frightened of the wrath and the fury that the Lord was angry with you to destroy you. And the Lord hearkened to me also at that time. And with Aaron, the Lord was also very furious, almost to destroy him. And so I prayed also for Aaron at that time. And I took your sin to the calf, which you had made, and I burned it with fire, and I crushed it, grinding it well until it was fine dust. The brook that descends from the mountain, I cast it into. And at Taverah, and at Massah, and at Kivrot HaTa'avah, you provoked the Lord even more to anger. And when the Lord sent you from Kadesh Barnea, saying, go up and possess the land I've given you, you defiled the word of the Lord your God, and you did not believe on him, nor did you obey him. You've been rebelling against the Lord since the day I became acquainted with you. And
Thank
so
you
I've
so much, Linda. Let me invite Catherine, if you'd like to read a little bit starting at verse 25.
Okay, thank you, Rabbi. When I lay prostrate before Adonai, those 40 days and 40 nights, because Adonai was determined to destroy you, I prayed to Adonai and said, O Lord God, do not annihilate your very own people, whom you redeemed in your majesty and whom you freed from Egypt with a mighty hand. Give thought to your servants, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, and pay no heed to the stubbornness of his people, its wickedness and its sinfulness. Else the country from which you freed us will say, it was because Adonai was powerless to bring them into the land that he had promised them, and because he rejected them that he brought them out to have them die in the wilderness. Yet they are your very own people, whom you freed with your great might and your outstretched arm. Thereupon Adonai said to me, carve out 2 tablets of stone like the first, and come up to me on the mountain and make an ark of wood. I will inscribe on the tablets the commandments that were on the first tablets that you smashed, and you shall deposit them in the ark. I made an ark of acacia wood and carved out 2 tablets of stone like the first. I took the 2 tablets with me and went up the mountain. Adonai inscribed on the tablets the same text as on the first, the 10 commandments that he addressed to you on the mountain out of the fire on the day of the assembly. And Adonai gave them to me. Then I left and went down the mountain, and I deposited the tablets in the ark that I had made, where they still are, as Adonai had commanded me.
Thank you so much, Catherine. Mark Levenstein, would you like to continue? They were at verse 6 of chapter 10.
It'd be my pleasure, Rabbi. From Yeroth ben Zakan, the Israelites marched to Moshe. Aaron died there and was buried there, and his son Eleazar became priest in his stead. Excuse me. From there they marched to Gad, and from Gad to Joppath, a region of running brooks. At that time, the Lord sent the tribe of Levi to carry the ark of the Lord's covenant, to stand in attendance upon the Lord and to bless in his name, as is still the case. That is why the Levites have received no hereditary portion along with their kinsmen. Adonai is their portion, as Adonai your God spoke concerning them. I had stayed on the mountain as I did for the first time, 40 days and 40 nights. And Adonai heeded me once again. Adonai agreed not to destroy you. And Adonai said to me, up, resume the march at the head of the people. They may go in and possess that land that I have sworn to their fathers to give them.
Thank you so much. Let me invite Justin. Would you like to read starting at verse 12?
Thank you, Rabbi. And now, O Israel, what does the Lord your God ask of you? Only to fear the Lord your God, to walk in his ways and to love him and worship the Lord your God with all your heart and all your soul. To keep the commandments of the Lord and his statutes which I command you this day for your good. Behold, to the Lord your God belong the heavens and the heavens of the heavens, the earth and all that is on it. Only your forefathers the Lord desired to love them, and he chose their seed after them, you out of all peoples, as it is this day. You shall circumcise the foreskin of your heart, therefore, and be no more stiff-necked. For the Lord your God is the God of gods and the Lord of lords, the great, mighty, and awesome God, who will show no favor, nor will he take a bribe. He executes the judgment of the orphan and widow, and he loves the stranger to give him bread and clothing. You shall love the stranger, for you were strangers in the land of Egypt. You shall fear the Lord your God, worship him, and cleave to him, and swear by his name. He is your praise, he is your God, who did these great and awesome things for you, which your eyes have seen. With 70 souls your fathers descended to Egypt, and now the Lord your God has made you as the stars of heaven in abundance.
Thank you so much. Let me invite Norm, if you'd like to continue at the very start of chapter 11.
Love therefore your God Adonai, and always keep God's charge, God's laws, God's rules, and God's commandments. Take thought this day that it was not your children who neither experienced nor witnessed the lesson your God Adonai, God's majesty, mighty hand, and outstretched arm. The signs and deeds that God performed in Egypt against Pharaoh, king of Egypt, and all his land. What God did to Egypt's army, its horses and chariots, how Adonai rolled his back upon them the waters of the Sea of Reeds when they were pursuing them, thus destroying them once and for all. What God did for you in the wilderness before you arrived in this place, and what God did to Darham and Abiram, the sons of Eliab, son of Reuben, when the earth opened up their mouth and swallowed them along with the households, their tents, and every living thing in their train from amidst all Israel. But that it was you who saw with your own eyes all the marvelous deeds that Adonai performed. Therefore, keep therefore all the instruction that I enjoin you today, so that you may have the strength to enter and take possession of the land that you are about to cross into and possess, and that you may long endure upon the soil that Adonai swore to your fathers to assign to them and to their heirs, a land flowing with milk and honey.
Thank you, Norm. Jay, would you like to read a little bit? We're now at verse 10.
Thank you, Rabbi. For the land that you are about to enter and possess is not like the land of Egypt from which you have come. There, the grain you sowed had to be watered by your own labors, like a vegetable garden. But the land you are about to cross into and possess, a land of hills and valleys, soaks up its water from the rains of heaven. It is a land which Adonai your God looks after, on which Adonai your God always keeps his eye from year's beginning to year's end. If then you obey the commandments that I enjoin you this day, loving Adonai your God and serving him with all your heart and soul, I will grant the rain for your land in season, the early rain and the late. You shall gather in your new grain and wine and oil. I will also provide grass in the fields for your cattle, and thus you shall eat your fill. Take care not to be lured away to serve other gods and bow to them, for Adonai's anger will flare up against you, and he will shut up the sky so that there will be no rain, and the ground will not yield its produce, and you will soon perish from the good land that Adonai is assigning to you. Continue.
Sure, let me bring us home here, our last few verses. Therefore, impress these my words upon your very heart, and bind them as a sign on your hand, and let them serve as a symbol on your forehead, and teach them to your children, reciting them when you stay at home and when you're away, when you lie down and when you get up, and inscribe them on the doorposts of your house and on your gates, to the end that you and your children may endure in the land that God swore to your ancestors to assign to them, as long as there is a heaven over the earth. If then you faithfully keep all this instruction that I command you, loving God, walking in God's ways, and holding fast to God, God will dislodge before you all these nations. You will dispossess nations greater and more numerous than you. Every spot on which your foot treads shall be yours. Your territory shall extend from the wilderness to the Lebanon, and from the river, the Euphrates, to the western sea. No one shall stand up to you. Adonai your God will put the dread and fear of you over the whole land in which you set foot, as God promised you. That's our Torah portion for the week. I'd like to share with you a focus study. If you have a copy of the study sheet, I invite you to take it out at this point. And this year, when I was reading through it, I noticed just a very subtle shift in some of the language that Moses uses when he is recounting for them a particular incident. And that's the incident when the Israelites were in the wilderness and they were starving. They didn't see where food would come from. And then something fell from the sky, and they woke up in the morning and they saw flaking over the grass before them some kind of substance. It seemed to be substance that perhaps they could eat. So here is number one on the study sheet is the initial description of that moment from the book of Exodus. When the fall of dew lifted, there, over the surface of the wilderness, lay a fine and flaky substance, as fine as frost on the ground. When the Israelites saw it, they said to one another, Manhu, what is that? For they did not know what it was, Manhu. And then Moses said to them, that is the bread which God has given you to eat. The house of Israel named it manna, man, meaning, what is it? So first of all, this initial description from the book of Exodus is on one hand fascinating because the people wake up and they see this strange substance before them, and they say, what is that? And Moses tries to explain, that's bread. And even though their leader Moses has said it's bread, they call it, what is it? So they continue to insist upon calling it something that evokes mystery and strangeness and unfamiliarity, even though Moses has tried to normalize it for them by saying, it's not really strange, it's just bread. So here, now we are in the book of Deuteronomy, and now Moses is recounting that moment, but he changes the word that he calls the stuff from what he called it back in Exodus. Here's from our verse from this week's portion. Moses is saying to the Israelites, God gave you manna to eat, which neither you nor your ancestors had ever known, in order that you might know that a person does not live on bread alone, but on whatever comes forth from God's mouth. So here is this recapitulation by Moses of that moment of starvation, that moment of salvation by having this strange substance appear before them. And whereas Moses in an Exodus telling tries to normalize it and reassure them, it's not strange, it's bread. And the Israelites resist calling it something familiar. They insisted upon calling it something that evoked its strange nature. And here, when Moses is recounting that moment, he adopts the word, the term that the Israelites had originally given it, calling it manna, meaning, what is it? It is as if Moses in this moment realizes that really what sustained them during this journey through the wilderness, which on a spiritual and psychological level is really a journey of shedding old self, a confrontation with a new reality and new responsibilities, and the development of, if you will, of a new character, a new individual character for each one, a new communal character for the nation. That what sustained them was not something that was uh, normalized, something familiar, but what really sustained them, that fed that hunger, was strangeness. And so Moses, at this moment, as he's getting ready to discharge the Israelites to complete their mission, realizes that's what sustained them. And perhaps that's truly what's going to sustain them in the rest of their journey, to be able to be in contact with that which is unfamiliar, that which is strange, because it evokes for them something questioning. So let's turn now on number 3 on the study sheet to Aviva Zornberg, one of the great living commentators in the English language, certainly, of Torah, and from her book Bewilderments. And she writes, "Manna is both bread and not bread. A substance that tells of the unknown leads the consumer to see through its flimsy appearance. The unknowable leads the traveler to an imaginative knowledge which refigures and transfigures the world." At this moment, I'd like to turn to our painting for this week. And it is a painting by Jasper Johns called Flag. A little bit about Jasper Johns. Jasper Johns was born to a couple in Savannah, Georgia, and about 1930, and they name him Jasper, and they name him Jasper after a Revolutionary War hero in South Carolina, William Jasper, who, in a moment when the British were attacking Charleston as a way to land troops in Charleston to open up a Southern front in 1776, in June 1776, against the colonial rebellion, there were dozens of British warships that amassed in the harbor, and they fired about 7,000 cannon and broadside shots against the fort that was protecting the city of Charleston and guarding the entrance into Charleston's harbor. And there were only 26 cannons on the fort that was protecting the harbor, and each cannon only had about 28 shots. And they were able to fire off about 1 shot for every 50 shots that the British were able to launch. And in the middle of all this attack by the British, one of the shots shattered the flag post that was holding up the flag that was flying over the fort. And this sergeant in the South Carolina colonial militia leaped over the ramparts and picked up the flag, jumped back up onto the ramparts. He then reattached it to a staff that was used to plunge shot into the cannons, and he reattached the flag to that staff, and he waved it. And within a few hours, by nightfall, the British fleet was shattered. Some of it had been sunk, and they were in full retreat. And a few days later, the Declaration of Independence was declared in Philadelphia. So they named this child that was born to them Jasper in honor of this figure who had risked his life to rescue the flag and to reestablish it and wave it as a symbol of liberty, which was the one word that was on this particular flag of the fort, was the word liberty. Jasper Johns grows up in Savannah, but very early age. By the age of 9, his mother moves him to Charleston. He goes to school, high school in Charleston. He attends University South Carolina. During the Korean War, he is drafted, and he spends part of his time at Fort Jackson in Columbia, South Carolina. And then after the war, he moves to New York City, and he becomes an artist. And art, by the time Jasper Johns gets there in the early 50s, abstract expressionism is still the reigning art movement in New York City and really in the world at that time. But it's beginning to be challenged by some other younger artists, including Jasper Johns. And Jasper Johns, within 2 years of his release from military service, he has a dream of painting a large American flag. And he said he got up the next morning, he bought all the materials to paint a painting of an American flag. And I appreciate that Steve Benton kind of pointed this out to me, and which is the flag that we see here is not the one that he did in 1954, 55. Jasper Johns did a series of American flag paintings. It was one of the symbols that he focused on for doing many, many different versions of it, along with maps of the United States and along with also targets, bullseyes, that he also did a series of each of those as well. This flag here that's on the study sheet is probably one that he did in 1967. But they carry with it a similar style, which is that he would take a canvas and then he would cut up strips from newspapers, and he placed them on the canvas, and then he would pour pigmented wax and caustic on top of that and heat it up, and then those strips would become shriveled up and kind of hard to decipher and hard to read, and then he would shape these the different pigments, the pigmented wax, into the shape of an American flag. And he did that because he wanted to take something that we thought we knew. We see the American flag in so many settings and in so many ways. And usually it's either some kind of a printed version of it or a flag that's of cloth that we see waving from a flagpole. And he did this as a way for us to look at something that we think we know and to engage with it and to realize and give us the opportunity to explore it and to see what really is there. And the fact that you have this crumpled up newspaper clippings underneath it, which in their former state provided a coherent and contextualized message. Now they are hard to comprehend. It requires some serious investigation to see what is the story underneath this symbol. And that's what his invitation is, to basically say, what does this object, which is so familiar to you, mean to you at this moment in time? And he doesn't tell us what it is to mean to us. It's an invitation to explore, to interrogate, to investigate, and to be, if you will, a participant in the creation of some kind of meaning out of something that's familiar. So here is what Jasper Johns himself said about this. He said, "It all began with my painting a picture of an American flag. I went on to similar things like targets, things the mind already knows. I made the flags and targets to open people's eyes. They were both things which are seen and not looked at, not examined." So that to me is what I saw in this week's Torah portion, in this just very subtle shift in language by Moses as he's retelling the story, which is, yes, he's, in a sense, he's telling the Israelites what really fed you, what really nurtured you, what really sustained you in this journey that we've all been on of uncovering a new self, of uncovering a new purpose, a new mission, as you get ready to enter into creating a reality that we call in the land of promise. He says, what sustained you is not what is familiar. What sustained you is the power to question. And So I conclude on our study sheet on the back side with number 5 with this quote from one of the great American writers, James Baldwin, who had his own difficult, contentious, complicated relationship with this great country. And James Baldwin said, "The purpose of art is to lay bare the questions which have been hidden by the answers." And so I named this week's study session, "What is it?" Because I think that is what James Baldwin is always encouraging us to explore. I think that's what Jasper Johns in this painting is inviting us to explore. And indeed, I think that is what Torah, in this very moment that we're reading, is encouraging us to explore. Always hold on to the nurturing power of questioning, what is it? With that, I'd love to know what you experienced, what you said, what you heard, what you saw. And Mark Levinstein, please share.
Yeah, I just suddenly had a rather stomach-turning, disturbing thought in putting the image into the context of today, and how the intention is to get us to think, but it could be manipulated to look at obscuring what we ought to be thinking about. And that just kind of turns in my stomach.
Do you want to say something about obscuring? Is that the word you use there?
Yeah.
Yeah.
But, well, you could paper over whatever's under there with patriotism without thinking about what patriotism really is about. And I think in our politically divided country, that's a scary possibility, if not a partial reality.
Okay. It's scary. What Richard asked to clarify what you just scary, if not what?
Scary possibility, if not a reality.
Scary possibility, if
I mean,
not.
I don't want to delve into a political discussion, but it just made me think of that.
Okay, got it. Okay.
In a disturbing way in trying to contextualize this into what does this mean today?
Got it. Okay. Let me call upon Richard and then Norm.
Yeah, I want to respond to what you're saying, because especially I noticed that this is not from Charleston. This is a more current flag, and it's a Vietnam War flag. And what I got out of feeling when I looked at this was experiencing what that flag witnessed. And that's the scary part, that this goes on, these wars continue to go on. And that's when we look at our flag, we normally don't think that, but when I saw all the dirt or whatever it is there, to me, that was what this sentient flag witnessed.
Mm.
And this is going on throughout the world, in Pakistan, in Sudan, in January 1st. And so I think it speaks very much today. And as long as I got the floor for the moment, I want to say that Moses says that is the bread as a generic term. But bread is more than just bread. There's other things that what God's giving us here. And I noticed too, he says, these 40 years, and your feet didn't swell, and the leather didn't get worn off your shoes. And it made me think again, what we talked about before was, this is a dream that's going on. We're involved in this dream, and Moses is telling about the dream. And if you look up the symbolism of the number 40, it's exactly what it says down here in number 4. Number 4, number 5, no, number 3, refigures and transfigures. I looked up the meaning of 40, and it's moving from one great task to another great task. So I'm happy to see this as a group of people who have been in a dream workshop. And that's these 40 years, this miracle time. The cover story is this walking and doing this thing, but it's about going through a change in the epistemology about how you look at the world. And that's exactly what this is not Andy Warhol. This is not Hans Soup. This is what our flag witnesses on a daily basis. It's not a grand old flag. It's a witness to great tragedy, and we've been part of it.
Okay.
That's all I'm gonna say.
Thank you. Let me invite Norm and then Catherine.
Wow, that's a hard act to follow. um, when I look at the flag, not this flag, just generally, when I look at the American flag, it brings a feeling of pride and power, emotion. And when I read Torah, it gives me a sense of pride. There's a power there, certainly a lot of motion, a lot of interest. So there's a kind of, I don't know, resonance that I'm seeing between these. Looking at Torah more carefully, there's always more. There's always depths that I never thought of before, some of which, that I learn about in Torah study. And there's no end to the depths. I'm looking at this flag, and it's a little bit different than most American flags all American flags that I've seen before. The basics, the red, white, and blue are all there, but look at these stars. They're different. There's some of them that are full stars, some that are partially grayed out, some of them are partial, and there's some reflections of stars there, much more complicated than the standard American flag that we looked at. In looking at the red, white, and blue, what are these changes of color and shadow that they're there? It reminds me it feels like a texture, almost like a landscape that I'm looking at. Another example of there's a whole lot more here than I thought about when I first saw it, when I looked at it more carefully. And in this way, the parsha and the flag, to me, are kind of playing off each other.
Let me just ask you a little bit more about that. Are you saying that the Torah portion, when you're looking at the Torah portion now, it's not as simple as perhaps you once experienced it?
Oh, it's never as simple as I once
Okay.
once experienced it. Never.
Okay.
It's it's like a fractal. Fractal is a image or a mathematic expression that has endless depths when you look into it.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Norm. Let me call upon Catherine. And you'll need to unmute, Catherine.
Yes. Okay. Two thoughts, pretty simple. One is in the Parshat, felt that core idea is reciprocity, that Moses sort of talking about, look, Adonai has taken care of you, made sure that you survived all of this and thought about your well-being. And now Adonai is asking you to follow his ways. And also, obviously, Moses inscribing himself into this process, sort of like, I've looked after you. And so I beseech you to heed these teachings. The second thought has to do with the painting, and that, well, if the question in the Parshat is, what is it? If one looks at this flag that Jasper Johns has placed before us to contemplate, I think one of the questions that comes to mind is, what does it mean to me? What does this mean to me? And what is my participation in this? So those are my thoughts.
Thank you. Steve, you want to share?
Okay, I'm muted. Yeah.
There you go.
I'm good. Okay. I'm both very part of what I have to say is like just on the surface or something, but then it's deep too. We're all coming to these things with different levels of knowledge, experience, and meaning. And so we started the discussion right here, wanting to separate the flag from politics, but I don't have much to say about that right now. But the idea of talking about the flag, even if it includes politics, is apropos right now, just to recognize our feelings. But anyway, I also, as I have gone through Torah study with you for a number of years, and I keep doing that, and I don't have 40 years of experience reading the same things every year. So little things don't trip in my head automatically, like what is it? That's very key if you've been reading it and talking about that question for 40 years. But not having that depth of knowledge, I'm sitting here, okay, Rabbi put a lot of stuff on a piece of paper here. What is he trying to communicate with me? And so I'm coming with it. Okay, I'm looking at a flag, and then I look at the flag, and for some reason, well, I want to count the stars. I want to see, refresh my memory. Well, I know there's 50 of them, but I don't know the pattern they're laid out. But lo and behold, okay, now I'm looking at this flag, and it's got 50 stars. And I got a text with that flag that says, okay, he was born in 1930. He painted it when he was 24, 25. So whatever that just added up to, that means he painted it 30, 50, yeah, like around 54, 55. And well, I can't have 50 stars on this flag that was painted in 1945. So it's like, well, what is a rabbi trying to call my attention to? And that's, well, I wrote him a note and just said my head was exploding with cognitive distortion, for lack of a better word, saying, okay, this disagrees with that. What am I to make of that? Did he just make a mistake? Do I tell him what I saw? And so I decided to tell him. But anyway, back talking to, he asked me back, what is it? Once again, I don't key to that, but I look at it, I see it's the title of the study sheet. It's the title of the commentary. It's mentioned several times in the commentary. And given what I was, the off the wall place I went with it, okay, what is it? I look at that flag and say, okay, you're telling me that this flag was made in 1954, then what in the hell is this? And well, just then I would explore why is he, asking me what it is. I beat that to a pulp. And then, well, I have the floor. To me, the idea of, I'm not a big art follower. I want to say I have certain, you learn simple things, simple education to school. You learn who Max Escher is. I didn't know who Chagall was when I was younger. I mean, I was in my 20s when a Jewish family I knew had these Marc Chagall paintings on their wall. I didn't know who he was or whatever, but they looked like very nice paintings. And so, over the years, over the decades, oh, yeah, he's a pretty famous artist. So there are a lot of things I don't know. And anyway, when I look at the flag too, what I look at, a number of times I want to make sure, count those damn stars, because if I'm going to challenge someone and say, how come there are 50 stars on this? You better make sure you got your ducks in a row. But anyways, ways of looking at it just gets back to math, and it's one of the things, how knowledge builds on more knowledge. That field of stars, just when you're learning how to multiply, you take blocks of numbers and 5 times wherever. I just wrote myself a note. Simplistic. Okay, so the top row, there's 5 rows of 6, and that's 30. And then the alternate rows are 4 rows of 5, which is 20, 30, and 20. Anyway, it makes me think about the math of how you're not going to see that when you're young. So it takes multiple exposures of things to possibly see interrelatedness. And I can't think of any more lightweight to say, so I'm done. Thank you for listening.
Thank you, Steve, for contributing. So, and let me pick up on one of the first things that you said there. You were being somewhat self-dismissive when you said, "Oh, I haven't read the Torah for this material for 40 years, so I don't have that level of being able to delve into it and that kind of a depth way." Remember that one of the lessons of what happened at Mount Sinai was, as the rabbis say, everyone experienced what happened there in their own way. And what's really important is that we share that with one another. Because when we share that with one another, our own experiences, our own perceptions, then we begin to really build what Torah is, which is, if you will, an infinite supply of insights and wisdom. And so someone may have been dealing with matters of fractals, and other people may have been dealing with matters of archetypes, and other people may have been dealing with matters of physical pain and suffering and palliative care. You know, all of that, according to this tradition, constitutes a form of Torah. All of that constitutes a form of understanding what it means to be a human being. And if we can sort that out and share it with one another, then we won't, on the one hand, we won't feel alone. We won't feel isolated. We'll begin to the healing process. So I want to acknowledge that. The other is the notion about what is it is really comes out of the Torah. That's what the Israelites said when they saw the substance. Uh, and Jasper Johns is presenting something to us that we think we know, and he's just basically saying what's important is to defamiliarize yourself from it, because what's well, let me put it this way. Another section, an important part of what was in this week's Torah portion, had a lot to do with idolatry. Don't worship other gods. And another important message in there was, and don't think that what you've created when you get into the land of promise is all by your hand. And to me, there is some kind of connection between the notion of idolatry and the notion of thinking, I did all this, I built this, I did, and because idolatry is ultimately an attempt to contain powerful forces in the hope that you can create a static image of it, a static presence of it, and that you somehow can manipulate it in some kind of way. And that all goes back to one's attempt to assert power over the world. And what Torah here is doing, and what Jasper Johns, in a sense, is doing, is trying to shatter that notion, to take something that looks like it has fixed meaning, and he's trying to defamiliarize ourselves from it. And he's trying to say, rather than making it something that has fixed meaning, make it a source of provocation. Because that's what a true flag of liberty, which is what his namesake saved, that's what liberty is ultimately all about. It is a provocation to participate in the ongoing enterprise of creating an expansion of human possibilities. And that's what Torah here is trying to share with us. Go ahead, Margot, please unmute and share with us. Yes, you'll need to unmute, Margot. We're so looking forward to hearing what you have to share.
Better?
Yes.
The wonderful thing to me about these sessions is I am constantly going, oh my gosh, I didn't know that meant that. And leaving each session with questions in my mind, thinking, what did that really mean? How does that apply? And that's what I get from these sessions. An awful lot of oh my goshes.
If all one can take away from these sessions, which is what I do as well, which is, oh my God, then we've really expanded the
Exactly.
universe of our thinking. Go ahead. Go ahead, Tribute. Yeah.
Absolutely. That's all I.
Thank you, Margaret. And Norm, please, I see you've got your hand raised.
Yeah, question. I didn't quite catch, you were talking about Moses called the man different in Exodus than here.
Yeah.
And what was the difference? What were the words that he used?
Because in Exodus, the people call the substance man. What is it? And Moses tries to normalize what they're seeing by calling it, oh, it's bread, it's lechem. It's not man, it's not a question. It's something that you know and are familiar with, lechem. But here, when he retells the story in our Torah portion, he doesn't call it lechem, bread. He calls it manna. It's something you didn't know and your ancestors didn't know. And he says, I guess now I understand, he says, that's what nurtured you, the sense of the unfamiliar. So that's the difference in the language that's being used in the two portions.
Thank you.
Thank you. I want to thank each and everyone for contributing to this wonderful level of questioning, and we do it together in a way that doesn't threaten anyone, that doesn't judge anyone's questioning. It's an invitation, a safe environment within which to engage in the level of exploration that makes us both bigger people and a bigger people. You know, a bigger person and a bigger people, because we are able to absorb and assimilate knowledge and wisdom and insights coming from so many different sources. And ultimately, we create a bigger Torah. Thank you all very much. God bless you all. I look forward to our regathering. Be well. Thank you so much for joining together.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Thank you.